Welcome back, everyone. This is the second time you get to deal with me this week. I hope you are super excited to have Erin join us again. Erin is a professional when it comes to teaching everyone about nutrition. She's been here 3-4 times now, so I hope you're excited to learn more. It is the last week of peak, but we will be looking to return in the upcoming months. So let's make sure we're paying attention. If you have any good questions, make sure you ask them. But without further ado, Erin, I'll hand it over to you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me back and coming to hang out with me here and spend some time. I am really excited to talk about tonight's topic, which is making sense of nutrition labels. I think this is one where there can be a lot of confusion and overwhelm sometimes trying to navigate, is this healthy? Is this unhealthy? There's a lot of confusion around it. So tonight we are going to make sense of it all. We are going to simplify it so that you feel a little bit more comfortable navigating this stuff and don't feel like that overwhelm when we're trying to make sense of, is this the right snack or food choice for me? So one of the things I always like to touch on when it comes to making sense of nutrition labels and all this is that packaged foods are absolutely a great way to supplement a balanced diet. Sometimes, don't get me wrong, whole foods are awesome. It's great when we can be preparing our own meals and having whole food options, fruits, veggies, nuts, seeds, all those kinds of things. Those are great and very health supportive options. But that doesn't mean that there isn't a place for more convenient options, for packaged options. And there's actually a lot out there that can be a really great way to round out a balanced diet, make it a little bit easier to make sure you're getting everything you need, having fuel on the go. There's lots of great reasons to include some packaged products, more convenient options. And it's all just a matter of figuring out where they fit in for you. So like I said, the whole foods piece, it's great, but tonight we're going to talk about how to navigate, packaged options and processed options to know if they are going to be the right fit for you. Because like I said, there are many reasons, including them, can make sense for us. There's the convenience factor. There can even be a nutrition factor sometimes if we're trying to supplement with, certain vitamins and minerals. There's so many foods that are now fortified, which can actually help round out a balanced diet really nicely. And there's, of course, the satisfaction piece. It's really cool. Some of the things that, food science has been able to create where we can have these health supportive options that are also very satisfying and convenient. So we get to kind of have this nice balance there. And like I said, it's really just about understanding how they fit in your diet. And the best way to do that is to make sense of the nutrition label. How do we make sense of food packaging to know if this is something that does fit for us, that's going to support our needs, our goals, and all that? So that's what we are breaking down this evening. So tonight we are going to be talking about the main components of, what's going on a food label. How do we make sense of these different pieces? We're going to make sense of ingredient lists, what to look for when it comes to the nutrition facts panel, and what marketing gimmicks to watch out for as well, because there is a lot of that. At the end of the day, these foods are packaged in a way because they want to sell them to you, right? And so how do we make sense of, what actually is a good idea and maybe a supportive option, and what might be something just to kind of watch out for and ignore and not take too seriously because it's just marketing. So we're going to go through all of that today. So we'll start by just going through the anatomy of a food label. What are the different components we're going to talk about tonight? So you can see on your left-hand side there, we have the nutrition facts panel itself. That's where we see, the calories, fat, carbohydrates, content, all of that. In the middle there, we have our ingredients list, which lists all of the ingredients that we can find in that food. And then there's also the packaging itself, because sometimes there can be things on here, like you can see on this Cheerios box, we can see, whole grain is the first ingredient kind of thing, or oat fiber helps lower cholesterol. So things like this, how do we make sense of, what's going to be supportive and what isn't? So these are going to be the three pieces we are looking at this evening. And we will start with ingredient lists. So one common phrase that often comes around, I'm not sure 100% where it came from, but in terms of, making healthy choices and navigating nutrition lists, one of these common rules that comes up is, it should be as short as possible, like no more than 5 ingredients, and don't buy anything that you can't pronounce, right? That's a pretty common one. It's like, oh, if you can't pronounce it, don't buy it. And if it's a long ingredient list, like put it back. And we see that all the time. And is that necessarily the case? Is that actually helping us make supportive, healthy decisions in terms of packaged foods. So just to give you an example, let's take a look at this ingredient list right here. So this is for a food. We've got a whole long list. We can see it's a lot more than 5 ingredients, and there's lots of stuff in here that maybe is difficult to pronounce, right? We've got glucose, fructose, sucrose, maltose. We've got all sort of different acids. We've got riboflavin, thiamine. We've got flavors. We've got colors. There's a lot going on here. I can't pronounce all of this stuff, that's for sure. We've got a long list of things we can't pronounce in here. What do we think this food is? What do we think that this this packaged option might be? Well, if we take a look, it's actually just a banana. So one of those things we just want to make sure that we don't fall into is this trap that just because we can't pronounce something or just because it's a long ingredient list means it can't be healthy. And that's not the case at all. At the end of the day, everything is chemicals. Like an apple is made up of chemicals, banana is made up of chemicals. They're natural, but they still can be boiled down to these chemical names. So just because we can't pronounce something or it has a long ingredient list doesn't necessarily mean it's not health supportive. And there's a lot of ingredients that I think we shy away from just because we don't recognize them, right? If it doesn't say, like wheat or milk or sugar or things like this, where we clearly know what that is, we tend to shy away. And that doesn't necessarily have to be the case. It's just that it's all been boiled down to its chemical names. So we want to get out of the habit of thinking that just because it has a chemical sounding name must mean it's bad or unnatural, things like that. Because as we can see with this example right here, that's not necessarily the case. This banana is a great whole food option, right? And it happens to have a long ingredient list. So making sense of our ingredient list. So what are we actually looking for? How are they laid out? The first thing we need to know when we are reading the ingredients list on something is the ingredients are going to be listed in order from like the most that it has in it to the least by weight. So the first ingredient we see on there is what the food contains the most of, and the last ingredient is what it contains the least of. So this is important to know because it can help us make sense of, whether or not a food might be supportive for us depending on sort of where an ingredient falls. So in this case, this is a label off of chicken broth, and the first ingredient is chicken broth, which is something we like to see because we would expect there to be a lot of chicken broth in our chicken broth. Yes. So they're listed. Oh, hang on, lost in the light. There we go. 1 second. There we go. It's being a turkey tonight. Why are you doing that? I don't know what's going on with it. Okay, sorry about that. So like I said, just to reiterate, long ingredient lists don't necessarily mean bad. It's just more about making sense of what those ingredients might be and if they work for us. And again, whole foods are great. So when we can recognize the name, that's awesome. But again, not being nervous about unfamiliar names. Like there's a lot of things, people be like, oh, maltodextrin, like what's that? It's just a starch. It's a naturally occurring starch that they use in a lot of products for a lot of different reasons. It's not necessarily like some scary evil chemical. So there's a lot of foods like that. So not to get too nervous about unfamiliar names, because a lot of them are really run-of-the-mill things like sugar alcohols, like naturally occurring starches, things like this that contribute to texture and flavor and are typically very safe for consumption. It's more a matter of if certain ingredients don't work for you, but we'll get to that. So that is the general layout. Basically, we're looking for, that first ingredient, and the first few ingredients is going to be what is most in the product and going in descending order from there. So what are the things we do want to look for? So obviously we know when we are buying chips or cookies or chocolate bars, things like that, like we know that those are treat type foods. We maybe don't necessarily need to look at the ingredient list to know what kind of things are going in there. We know it's going to be sugar and things like that. And that's fine because we're choosing those things as, our treat thing or snack thing. But what about the foods that we are actually incorporating to make healthy meals and as like a consistent part of our balanced diet? That would be more what I would pay attention to. Because like I said, if we're buying the cookies and the chips and things, we know those are treat snack things. We're not necessarily purchasing them for health supportive reasons. It's more, what are we including in our day-to-day diets? And we want to be getting the most bang for our buck with those things, right? So like breads and cereals, snack bars, crackers, soups, sauces, dressings, like all these things that can round out our healthy meals and be nice supplements to our snacks on a regular basis. Those are the things we might want to look a little bit more into to see, again, if we're getting the most bang for our buck. Another thing that we might want to question a little bit too is anything with health claims. And we'll get to that piece in a moment. But that is generally where I would be more curious about looking at the nutrition ingredient label, is the things that it's like, okay, I want this to be, a regular, consistent part of a healthy diet. So let's make sure that it's something that feels best for me. So what are the questions we ask? Well, we want to look at those main ingredients. And one of the easiest ones to look for often is like, is sugar the main ingredient? As like, within like the first 1, 2, 3. And again, it's not that sugar is a bad thing, but obviously it's easy to get a lot of it in packaged foods, and some packaged foods rely heavily on sugar. So just taking a look to see, like, is sugar the first ingredient on this, granola package, or on this granola bar, or on this thing? In which case we might want to take a look at some other options, right? Just because we know the first few ingredients are going to be the most it contains the most of in the food there. So if sugar is one of the main ones and we're looking for it to be something that's going to be a satisfying, health supportive addition to our meals, then it might just be something we want to swap out. So that's one of the first things I would look for. Another thing we look for on the ingredient list is, does it contain what you would expect it to? If we grab a jar of tomato sauce, we're going to make an awesome veggie pasta with it. And we look at it, and tomatoes are like the 6th ingredient on there. And before that, we have like oil and sugar and flavors and seasonings. Maybe we want to take a look at a different jar of pasta sauce, because if we're getting tomato sauce, ideally tomatoes should be the first ingredient, right? So are we getting what we are expecting in the thing? So that's another thing too, is just kind of looking, does this contain what I would expect it to contain? And then another thing we can look at is the claim on the packaging matching the label? So a lot of times we see this with multi-grain products, or things that say they're made with whole grains. They can say it's made with whole grains or multi-grains, even if multi-grain or like a whole grain thing is like the absolute last ingredient on the list, meaning there could be like a flake of whole wheat in there and they could still say, oh, made with whole grains. So we want to look at the ingredients list to see what kind of grains are they actually using there. If we're looking for a whole wheat bread, and we want, those whole grains and all the wonderful nutrients and fiber that comes with that. And then we flip it on the package, and the first ingredient is enriched white flour. And then, multi-grains are maybe a little bit down the line. It's like, well, is this actually, the best choice? Maybe I'd be better off just getting something where, 100% whole wheat, or where whole wheat is the first ingredient. So just watching, because they can do sneaky little things like that with packaging and say, oh yeah, it's multigrain, but really we only use like one tiny little bit of like this extra grain to be able to call it that. So that can be something we just want to keep an eye on as well. Same goes for, things like, there's a lot of veggie products out there now, like, so things like, veggie chips or veggie crackers or veggie pastas, or, all these different things, and it'll say on the package, like, oh, made with spinach or made with cauliflower. And then if we flip it over and we look, so like an example would be, you can get like cauliflower mashed potatoes in the frozen section. It's like, oh, made with cauliflower. This is awesome. So I can, have this nice convenient option. Sorry, my light is being a jerk tonight. I will try to get it under control. But then we flip it and we look at the ingredient list, and it's like potatoes, cream, butter, cheese, all these things. And then cauliflower is like the 8th thing on there, right? So is it really a cauliflower mash, or is it mashed potatoes with a bit of cauliflower mixed in? So these are just the kind of little things we like to look for on the ingredient list. Same thing goes for like veggie, crackers and things like this. It'll be like, oh, made with spinach. And then you look and it's like they've sprinkled spinach powder on, and it's one of the last few ingredients. So just keeping an eye on, is this claim actually showing up in the ingredients? Does it contain the things I would expect it to? And again, I always just kind of like to look for, is sugar kind of the main component of it? Obviously, again, if we are looking for a treat option, like we want a cookie or a chocolate bar, that's totally fine because we're expecting that sugar. But if it's something like a soup or a pasta sauce or something like that, and we're seeing sugar right off the bat, it's like, we might be able to find a better option, just that would feel a little bit more health supportive. So those are the main things that we're looking for when it comes to our ingredient list. It's basically just taking a look and seeing, does this have what I expect it to have? And again, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to recognize every single ingredient, that it has to be this perfect whole foods list. It doesn't. It's more just looking for what you do recognize and seeing if that kind of lines up to your expectations. So what matters most? How do you navigate this without feeling like you're losing your mind trying to read all these ingredient lists? The big thing in terms of, those more chemically sounding names or things that maybe don't make you think of whole foods, like they sound like they are preservatives or things like that. It's really just making note of if there's any preservatives or, food additives, things like that, that don't work for you, just making note of those things and just keeping an eye for those. So like a lot of people have digestive upset with, say, gums. So like if guar gum is used as a thickening agent or a stabilizer in something, that might be something to stay away if that's something that bothers you. A lot of people also aren't bothered by gums. Same with certain sugar alcohols, especially maltol, can cause some digestive upset as well. Again, not for everyone, but it's just little things. So if you know there's certain ingredients that either don't agree with you, give you digestive problems or things like that, or maybe you just don't feel good about putting those things in your body, then just making note of those things can make it a little bit easier to navigate. But again, just not getting freaked out by any sort of long names you don't recognize, because a lot of times it's just the food science name for something that's a pretty harmless ingredient. Is just used to either preserve or add texture or things like that. So making note of any ingredients that don't work for you, considering the first 3 to 5 ingredients. Like I said, that's going to be what you find the most of in the food. So just considering in those first few ingredients, are they things that you would expect to be there? Are they things that you feel like would support you? Again, just kind of keeping an eye for like really high sugar things. And also keeping in mind, sugar goes under many, many different names. So it might say sugar, it might say high fructose corn syrup, it might say brown rice syrup, it might say agave nectar. There's a lot of different names for sugar to fall under. So just kind of keeping an eye for those things like barley malt. So words like malt, any sort of syrups, like that, even if it's something, coming from like a brown rice, it is still sugar. Anything with, that high fructose corn syrup label, those will be sugar things as well. So just kind of keeping an eye to see, is the bulk of this product made up by sugar? If that doesn't, if it's not like a treat type food, it's something you want to include regularly, it might be something that you want to look for a different option around. So considering those first few ingredients to make sure that they line up with what you expect and are things that will feel health supportive. And again, I know I keep reiterating this, but don't be afraid of the long names or long ingredient lists. It's not necessarily indicative of a health food. Like if you were to look at a protein powder, especially like a lot of protein powders now, I know there's one that I use that has all this like huge long ingredient list, but it's because it's all like supplemental stuff that's good for athletic performance. It's got like tart cherry juice and like probiotic stuff, and it's this whole long ingredient list, but it's all awesome things that add up to a product that's really health supportive, but it just sounds like a lengthy thing. So don't let that deter you. There's lots of healthy things that have those types of lists. So that is making sense of the ingredient list part. Now we're going to go on to reading the nutrition facts panel. And this part can be a little bit easier to navigate because obviously we aren't encyclopedias of information when it comes to ingredient lists, right? We might not know all the names for sugar or starches or things like that, that we can, just kind of get to know what things make sense for us. But the nutrition facts panel can be a little bit easier because it's just numbers we're working with here. So first, let's talk about how the nutrition facts panel is laid out, and then we'll go through what is important to actually pay attention to. So just going one at a time, we've got our little example nutrition facts panel here. So the first thing we're looking at, we have that little green bar at the top. That's the serving sizes per container. So the number of servings in the container, and then also what the nutrition facts are indicative of. So that in this case, it's showing the nutrition facts for a 55-gram serving, so that if you have a 55-gram serving, this is the nutrition you could look for, and there's 8 servings in the package altogether. Next up, we have calories per serving in that little orange box. From there, we have fat, and we've got total fat, and then we also have saturated fat and trans fat listed. We've got cholesterol listed, sodium content, total carbohydrates, and that's also broken down into dietary fiber and sugar. We've got the protein content of our food in that little red, pink kind of box. And then the last section is vitamins and other nutrients. So that's the layout of our nutrition facts panel. What should we actually be looking at? So depending on your health needs, your health goals, your priorities, you might want to look at all of this. You might want to look at specific things. Everybody might have different things they want to focus on, but I'm going to be walking you through some general stuff you can look at that can give you a better idea of how a food might serve you, might make you feel, all that. So those things that we're going to be looking at is the serving size, the fat, particularly the saturated and trans fat content. We're going to be looking at sodium, sugars and fiber, and protein. But that's not to say the other pieces aren't helpful. Like obviously, you might want to know the calories in a serving. The vitamins and minerals piece might be important to you. So it's not that, the cholesterol or the calories aren't important at all. It's just a matter of where your priorities are, where your goals are. And I want to just make it as simple as possible for you. So these are great things that can kind of simplify the whole process. But of course, if you have specific things that you are watching for, you may want to look at other elements of the panel as well. But let's talk about these things. So the serving size. The serving size is important just because it gives you an accurate picture of the breakdown, right? Like if we looked at a pint of ice cream and we see there's only 100 calories in here and low fat and this is really good. And then we go zoom in on the serving size and it's that's for, one serving and there's 20 servings in this little pint of ice cream. Well, that gives us a better idea of what they're actually trying to tell us, because sometimes products will try and make their product seem more healthy, lower calorie, lower fat, lower carb, whatever, by manipulating the serving size. So it's important just to get an accurate picture of what you're looking at, and the serving size is where we get that. So just making sure that before you evaluate any of the other information on the panel, you look at the serving size first, just so you have an idea of what you're actually looking at. So next up, again, it's not to say you might not want to look at calories. Calories are a pretty straightforward thing. If that is something that is important in terms of your overall health goals, then absolutely you can look at them. But we're going to talk next about the fat piece, specifically the breakdown of saturated and trans fats. So fat, again, is a really important part of our overall balanced diet, really important for so many things in terms of athletic performance and nutrition and recovery and all this. But where fats are coming from and the types of fats are important to note for overall health. So saturated fat, we just want to be mindful of saturated fat intake. And this is a heart health piece. So it's not that saturated fat is bad or that we can't include it. We absolutely can. It's just something that we definitely want to keep mindful of. We don't necessarily want to be overloading on it because that can have adverse heart health effects. So just being mindful that the saturated fat isn't too high, or at least we're not consistently consuming products that have a really high saturated fat content, can be just helpful and beneficial for overall heart health. So again, it's not bad if there's saturated fat in there. Lots of foods contain saturated fat naturally. It's more just something to be mindful and cognizant of if you see that number looking quite high, and particularly the percentage on the side. If we're seeing a percentage greater than 20 or 30, that's definitely a red flag. The trans fat piece. So trans fats, there are some naturally occurring, but specifically the ones that are manufactured, basically what they're doing is they are stabilizing an oil that would otherwise be liquid at room temperature and allowing it to be solid. So it's a chemical process. But what they found over the years of working with this product is actually that it does have pretty adverse health effects. Trans fats are not so great for us in terms of heart health, diabetes risk, all sorts of things. Trans fats are not the most health supportive ingredients. So they are being used less and less and less and less because we know this now. We know this about trans fats. So they're becoming less used, but definitely still something to keep an eye on. Just taking a peek at the amount of trans fat in the food is a helpful thing to look for, just to know that that's something we want to limit as much as we possibly can, just because it's not a very health supportive ingredient. Again, it's okay if it's here and there, but just being really mindful of it. Another little kind of tricky thing that sometimes packaging will do is they'll manipulate the serving size so that they can say it's zero trans fat, because I believe it's like if there's, less than 0.5 grams or something per serving, they're allowed to say it's zero trans fat. But in reality, if they make the serving size so tiny, and it's like, well, a normal person's serving size would be like 5 of this, there can be that trans fat content. So one thing we can look for on our ingredient lists is anything that says partially hydrogenated on it. If there's a partially hydrogenated oil in the ingredients list, that is going to be a source of trans fat. So just something to look for. These are just sort of health supportive pieces to keep an eye on. The saturated fat, again, you do not need to eliminate saturated fat. Saturated fat is fine to include in our diets. We just want to make sure we're not going in excess with it. Trans fats are something we want to limit as much as possible. And if you're looking at something and you're seeing, it says 0 grams of trans fat, but then on the ingredients list, it says partially hydrogenated oils, it probably does have some trans fat in there. So just something to keep in mind, something we might want to limit. Next up, sodium. So sodium is an important part of our diet, especially if we're highly active, especially if we are involved in sport activities, things like that. It's a really important part of our electrolyte balance and feeling energized and alert and good. So sodium is important. Sodium is not a bad thing. It is a very necessary part of our diets. But a lot of packaged foods tend to lean a little bit higher on the sodium content. Specifically, things like sauces and pre-made soups can be quite high in sodium. And it's just something we want to keep an eye on. Again, just like how we were talking about with saturated fats and trans fats, doesn't mean that you want to eliminate all this, like anything that's high sodium all the time forever. It's just being cognizant and mindful of how often we're including those things, because really high sodium levels can have impact on our blood sugar or on our blood pressure and things like that. So just keeping an eye, specifically, like I said, with sauces and pre-made soups tends to be where we see sodium the highest. In this case, like on this example label, it says 160 milligrams. That is not that much sodium. That's totally fine. The recommended daily intake is less than 2,300 milligrams. So if you were to look at a soup package and it's like 1,800 milligrams of sodium for like one serving, so you can't even eat the whole can for that, that's a lot of sodium. Again, might be something that you include once in a while, but maybe not all the time. So just something to look at there. Let's move on to carbohydrates. Specifically, let's talk about the breakdown of how to look at them. So it'll list total carbohydrates, but then underneath you'll see it's broken down into dietary fiber and sugars. So dietary fiber, really, really beneficial. We love fiber, really important for our gut health, digestion. We get lots of nutrients. It's really important for our overall health, really good for lots of health benefits. So fiber is great. We love seeing dietary fiber on that. So definitely something that's good. If we see higher grams of fiber, that's a good thing. And also a good sign that they are using, some whole grains in there, or some things that are beneficial for our gut health, because they do specify when they're laying out dietary fiber that it is beneficial fibers. So we love seeing that number. And when it's a little bit higher, that's a good thing. With total sugars, so it will list out added sugars. So that's basically just any sweetener they're adding on top of just the sugar that naturally exists in the food. And then they'll also list out sugar alcohols as well. So in terms of the total sugars and the added sugars, obviously keeping those a little bit lower is going to be a little bit more helpful in terms of packaged foods, just because we know if our sugar intake is really high, that tends to be where we get a lot of cravings, our appetite starts getting a little erratic, our energy gets a little erratic, and we can start to see some negative health consequences if our sugar intake is really high. So just watching for total sugars and being mindful, especially if we see a lot of added sugars on there, knowing that, so like in this case, of this example, total sugars is 12 grams, includes 10 grams of added sugar. So the majority of the sugar in there is sweetener added. And again, this doesn't have to be a bad thing. It is absolutely fine to include sweeteners and sugars in our diet. It's just about being mindful about how much we're consuming and making sure it's working for us. And then, like I said, they also will list sugar alcohols if they are there. So sugar alcohols work a little bit differently in our body in that we don't digest them. So that's why they're often listed separately, because they don't have the same impact on our blood sugar and our overall body as regular sugar does. It kind of doesn't get absorbed. So that's why they list it separately. And I just gave an example here. That's what it would look like if they're listing out sugar alcohols. So we'll tend to see sugar alcohols in things like protein bars, things that are sweetened with, say, like an erythritol or sorbitol, things like that. Those are sugar alcohols. So last piece we're going to look at here is the protein component. So protein, really important for muscle growth and repair and maintenance, overall health, really important as athletes and active people that we have a good source of protein in our snacks and meals wherever possible. And it also is what fills us up. It supports us having a stable appetite and cravings and energy levels. So protein is really a helpful component, and seeing a little bit more protein in a product is a good thing, because it's probably going to be more satisfying, more filling, give us more energy as we're going, especially if you're looking for something, say, as an after workout snack, or maybe something, that can kind of tide you over between meals. Looking for something that has protein in it is going to be really helpful. So those are kind of the key pieces that we're going to look at for simplicity's sake. Like I said, you can absolutely look at the whole panel. You can look at the vitamins and minerals below and all of that. But those are the key pieces that I like to look at for simplicity's sake. And they can give us a pretty good overall picture of how that food is going to serve us and make us feel. So let's simplify this and look for a little a rule of thumb to help us navigate, because sometimes we just see a bunch of numbers and percentages and it's like, well, is this too much, is this too little? Like, what's a good rule of thumb here? So what are we looking for from our convenient options? We're looking for something that fills us up, is satisfying, and keeps our hunger, craving, and energy levels in check, keeps us feeling balanced, right? We don't necessarily, of course, there's a time and place for all sorts of treats, but in general, we don't want to always be having things that are going to send our cravings on a spiral and have us feeling all over the place energy wise. We want to feel good throughout our days, throughout our activities, sports, and all that. So having something that fills us up and keeps our body feeling balanced is the general goal here, right? So there is a little rule of thumb. This is not a hard and fast rule. You don't have to do this for every single packaged food you look at, but it is kind of a good indicator of, will this food satisfy those requirements? Will this keep me feeling balanced and full and all that? So general rule of thumb is we take the total carbohydrates and we subtract fiber, we subtract sugar alcohols, and we subtract the protein number. And if that number is equal to or less than 10, then it's probably a good chance that that snack is going to be fairly satisfying, is going to keep our cravings in balance, energy in balance, all of that. It's just a general rule of thumb. Again, you don't have to follow this hard and fast. Like if something is like an 11 or a 12, it's not like, oh gosh, it's terrible or anything like that. Nor do you have to do this for every single thing that you get. This is just a general rule of thumb, especially around things like, say granola bars or meal replacement things that we really do want to fill us up and feel satisfied from. That is just a good rule of thumb. And then another thing we can look at is just total fat less than or equal to 15 grams. And that's going to give us a packaged option that is convenient and also can be fairly balanced and health supportive in terms of the macronutrients. So let's just look at an example of this. So here I've got a label. I believe this is for Halo Top ice cream. So we're going to take the total carbohydrates, which in this case is 15 grams. We're going to subtract the dietary fiber, which is 3 grams. We're going to subtract the sugar alcohol, which is 5 grams. And we're going to subtract the protein, which is 5 grams. And that leaves us with 2. So that is less than 10. And then we're going to look at the fat, and that's 2, which is less than 15 grams. So that is good. That's probably going to be a snack. That is something that is going to keep us fairly satisfied. It's going to feel nice and balanced for our body. And like I said, I know I keep saying this, but I always just want to reiterate, this is not a hard and fast rule. It's okay to eat things that do not fall into this category. But if we're generally looking for things that want to support that overall balance, this is just an easy way to look at it, especially if you find you get overwhelmed by the numbers and aren't quite sure what you're looking for. This kind of can help you just sort through all that. Yeah. Okie dokie. So next up, we will go on to the packaging itself. So we've talked about the ingredients list, we've talked about the nutrition facts. So let's talk about the marketing that we actually see on the packages. So a lot of these things are very familiar. We see it all over all sorts of different kinds of foods. We see things like, oh, made with real fruit, whole grain, fat-free, sugar-free, non-GMO, 100% natural, all these kinds of things, organic, immune support. There's all sorts of different labels we see all over our food. What do these things actually mean? Are they actually indicating that this is a healthy product? Is this actually something we should spend our money on? Well, let's dive into that and find out. So a lot of common product marketing terms, like I was just saying, all natural, 100% organic, high protein, low fat, no added sugar, gluten-free, whole grain, made with like, sometimes they'll throw like trendy ingredients in, like made with quinoa, made with antioxidants, made with, you know, like whatever. They'll throw an ingredient out there that is popular or sounds really healthy. So, you know, made with like organic oats, things like that. Or there will also be like functionality claims. So immune support, like good for digestion, like all sorts of things. They'll just sort of say these blanket terms that, do they actually mean anything? Well, let's talk about that. So let's talk about health halos, because that's what a lot of this is. Like I had mentioned at the beginning, when manufacturers are deciding on food packaging, they want you to buy it. And a really easy way for them to try and convince you to buy it is to make it seem like a really health conscious product. And what we call those kinds of labels is like health halos. So if we have something like it says gluten free, the product itself might have a little bit of a health halo because we see, oh, it's gluten free, it must be healthy. Oh, it's made with whole grains, it must be healthy. So it kind of gives us this illusion that the whole product overall must be a healthier option because it has these terms on the product. It makes us believe it's a better choice. But in reality, a lot of these claims don't actually mean very much about quality. That's not always the case, but it is a lot of the time. So like when something says all natural, that doesn't really mean a whole lot. I mean, we just looked at a whole list of, you know, what all the natural chemicals in bananas are. You know, there's all sorts of different ways like to manufacture foods and flavors and all this. Like all natural doesn't actually really mean anything. Organic doesn't always mean, like sometimes organic can indicate more nutrients, but in terms of packaged products, it rarely does, because organic sugar is still sugar, right? Organic brown rice syrup is still sugar, things like that. So just because it says organic or gluten-free doesn't necessarily mean it is health supportive. Again, this is why we always want to check those things against the ingredient list, right? Same thing with that whole grain idea. Well, is it actually made with, you know, whole grains right off the bat? Or did they sprinkle a few on at the end just so that they could put that on the label? Or, you know, like made with real fruit, things like that. Like they might have included the tiniest bit of fruit juice. Is that actually giving us any benefits? So just things to keep an eye on. Same goes for those sort of blanket terms like immune support, digestion support. There's no regulation around what allows them to use those labels. They can kind of just put whatever they want on there. It doesn't necessarily mean anything. So it doesn't mean that there aren't products that have health claims that are true, because there can be, but we want to be a little bit more skeptical when we're looking at packaged products, because again, the whole point is to get you to think that they're healthier so that you will buy their product over a different product, right? So we just want to be cognizant of that. And another thing to keep in mind too is sometimes it can be really expensive to buy some of these products that have the, you know, gluten-free or organic labels. And if we compare them to the standard version next to it, they can be quite similar, and we're spending 2 to 3 times more on them. So that's another piece too, is just considering, is this actually worth the money or not? But hopefully now you feel like you're equipped enough to be able to sort of look at an ingredient list and compare, look at the nutrition facts, and actually make sense of, is this product making sense for me, or is it just being marketed to me really well? So to sum it all up, and we'll have lots of space for questions here so we can dig in deeper, but I kind of wanted to do the whole overall view just so that we're all on the same page. But to sum it all up, packaged foods can absolutely be part of a healthy, balanced diet. Whole foods are great, of course, but that doesn't mean that we can't rely on, packaged options. And also it's great to have things like bread around and crackers, and, being able to rely on pre-made sauces and soups can make our lives so much easier. So it's really just being able to understand and discern how to make sense of those products. Convenience and chemicals are not a bad thing. It's just a matter of getting curious about what ingredients make sense for you. But like I said, a lot of those long, scary names like maltodextrin, things like that it's just a natural starch or a preservative, things like that, things that, enhance the flavor and texture of our food and are perfectly safe for consumption. Ignore the marketing terms and look to the ingredients and nutrition facts to make informed decisions. So if something is like plastered with, all sorts of marketing on the front with all these claims about how healthy it is, we want to look past that and actually look at what is actually in this product. What are the nutrition facts telling me to make sense of if it actually is worth our money and worth having in our pantries? And last but not least, as always, not stressing over perfection with it. It's okay to have options where it's like, oh, this is pretty good, but it does have it's a little higher in sugar than I would like, but overall I like the ingredients, things like that. Like we don't need to be perfect with all this. We don't need, the exact perfect packaged option. We don't need to, we don't need to get caught up in too much detail. It's really finding a balance in our overall diet and really getting curious about how these foods make us feel. The best way to know if a product is working for us is, am I feeling good? Am I feeling balanced and energized? Do I have pretty stable cravings? And do I feel good in my activities and sports and things like that? That's going to be your best rule of thumb of, is something working as a part of my healthy balance? So don't stress over getting it perfect or feeling like you always have to hit that rule of thumb with the nutrition facts, things like that. It's about finding a balance that works for you. But like I said, hopefully you feel a little bit more equipped to make sense of all this. And this gives you some information just so you can start looking past health claims and effective marketing to actually figure out if a food makes sense for you. So we kind of went through that real quick, but we can definitely go now and answer all the questions because I'm sure there are some.
Awesome. Yeah, we got some hands already raised. So Akira, we'll go to you first so you can unmute.
I have Fiber One bars, but I usually just have it on my hair day. So not every day. So when my hair is washed, that's the day I have the Fiber One bar.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, Fiber One bars are like a great decent option. I love that they have the fiber in there, right? Like we said, fiber is a good thing. We like seeing that fiber number up. So that's awesome.
Awesome. Thank you, Akira. Jordan McLeod, you can unmute.
Okay. I do have a question. So with people with diabetes, I don't really know much about diabetes, but my younger sister, she has diabetes. I was just wondering, how much insulin can she get, like, for the rest of us?
So in terms of I don't want to speak specifically to her intake just because I'm not her doctor, but in general, so if you're looking at packaged foods, things like that, limiting things with sugar is going to be really important. So again, looking at that ingredient list and making sure that if sugar is included, it's one of the last ingredients can be really helpful. And again, watching for sneaky sugar names like barley malt, high fructose corn syrup, agave nectar, things like that. So just making sure that if sugar is on the ingredient list, it's one of the last ingredients so that we know the majority of the product is not loaded with it. And then also using that rule of thumb we just talked about, where we take total carbohydrates minus the fiber, minus sugar, alcohol, minus protein. If that number is less than or equal to 10, that's going to be a little bit more balanced, because that's going to show us that our blood sugar is less likely to get really erratic with it. It's a little bit more balanced of a food because we've got a good source of protein and fiber in there. So the rule of thumb, and then also looking for just minimal sugar in the ingredients list is what I would look for with diabetes.
Well, actually, that's my younger sister, but with insulin and our hormones, I sometimes myself if I give myself instead of food, because I sometimes get dizzy myself. So what can I do to eat that kind of stuff?
Just making sure to so whatever you're having, making sure that there's a good source of protein in there as well, that there's some fiber, a little bit of fat, like that's going to be really helpful because that's going to help with the blood sugar balance piece. And then, yeah, just when you're shopping for different items, just taking a look at that nutrition panel to see if it is low, like keeping the sugars on the lower side is going to be really helpful.
Yeah, those are my 2 questions.
Awesome.
Thank you for a tip of the diabetes.
Of course, you're welcome.
Thank you, Jordan. Laura, you can unmute.
Okay. I just want to double check. I think I got the correct password since I will be leaving soon. I think I was told it was Bow Valley.
I believe that is right.
I just put in the chat. So Bow Valley is the password for tonight.
Okay. And I'm gonna say my question is are some types of foods healthier than others? Like, for example, if you have like a pizza with like spinach and tomatoes, is that healthier than like a Hawaiian pizza?
Yeah, like anytime that we can include more, veggies, because we're going to get more fiber, more nutrients from that, that's a great thing. It doesn't mean we can't have the ham and pineapple pizza, but yeah, anytime that we have some more veggies on there, some more whole grains, some like protein, that's definitely going to be more on the health supportive side for sure. But also keeping in mind too, the amount that's there, right? If we're looking at a pizza and the amount of spinach is like a handful, it's probably like not too much healthier, right? Versus if we're loading a pizza with veggies, then that would be a difference. So the quantity matters there too.
And my other question was, what you have at a movie theater for popcorn, does that have oil in it or butter?
I believe they use oil. They use like palm oil or something in there. It's definitely a chemical food.
Okay, well that's good for me. I'm gonna let you guys go now.
Thank you.
Thanks, Laura.
Bye.
Okay, Leonka, you can go next.
Hello, my question is, I'm lactose. If stuff say that may contain dairy, and I could have some, but not others, what does that mean?
So are you asking like if it says may contain dairy in it, if you can have it or not? It can depend. So like some foods can be lactose free but can still contain milk products because there's also casein and like dairy solids. So if it says lactose free, you should be good. If there's no lactose listed on the ingredients, you should be good, as long as you're okay with casein and like other milk solids. So that's that's the only thing. Sometimes it'll be like, lactose free may contain milk products. It's just because there's other components in dairy besides lactose. So as long as lactose is the only thing that bothers you, then as long as it says lactose free or doesn't list lactose in the ingredients, you should be okay.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for a great session.
Oh, you're so welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks, Leonka.
You're welcome.
Angela, you can ask your question. You able to unmute there?
Hi.
Hi.
My question is about real fruit candies.
Mm-hmm.
Are they really healthy?
They're candy. So not like this is one of those things where it's kind of a marketing thing where they're like, oh, made with real fruit, but it's just, they might use natural fruit flavors and things like that, but it is still a predominantly sugar product. So it's pretty comparable to any other candy that's out there. It doesn't necessarily have any benefits beyond other candies. So if you love it and that's a favorite treat, that's great, but definitely don't choose it because you think it is healthier than other candies, because they're pretty much the same. I know, it's
Okay.
disappointing.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Angela. Kaylee, you can unmute.
So, Erin, I have a good question
What's
for
that?
you. Can it be protein shake be a protein to have for snacks or breakfast?
Absolutely. Yeah, they make a great snack or meal. Totally.
I always have it every morning sometimes.
That's awesome. Yeah, a good protein shake's a great way to fill your day.
Oh yeah. So that is my question.
Awesome.
Thank you, Kaylee. Cassie, you can unmute.
My question is having like peanuts all the time a good thing to have or no?
It depends like how much you're having and how that's feeling for you. So peanuts are on their own are totally fine to have as a snack. They can be really filling because you've got a good source of fat in there. We've got a little bit of protein in there. So they can be a great like grab and go thing that fuels you up quickly. But they are also very dense calorie wise, right? So if we're like kind of having big handfuls all day long, we might start to feel like, oh my gosh, I'm so full all the time. Like I don't have room for anything else. So it's really just finding a balance in terms of the amount you're having, but peanuts as like a snack themselves are great. It's just finding the amount that feels good for you.
That was my question. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Cassie. Lori Cornwell.
Okay, I got really good questions. So, how do you program your brain to not eat after like, say you eat at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock? How do you program your brain to not eat after 7? And
Sorry, go ahead.
And what does EDTA stand for?
EDTA, where are you seeing that?
Like I see it in some of the ingredients because I'm a courtesy clerk.
Okay, hang on. I'm gonna look that up for you and then we'll talk about the
Yeah, because my doctor's trying to get me not to eat after 7 o'clock, but I'm struggling with that.
Okay, so
my brain doesn't want to stop.
Okay, so first I'm going to answer the EDTA. So it's used to fortify grain-based foods. It can be used as a preservative for texture, but it's safe for consumption. The amounts that they use in foods are totally safe for consumption. So
oh, cool.
That's a lot of things too, just as an aside. Sometimes there's ingredients where you'll see a headline and they're like, oh, this is a carcinogenic, like this causes cancer, this is bad for you. But the study will be on an amount that is so much greater than we would ever consume. And we always need to remember that like the amount really matters, because sometimes it's like, sure, yeah, like if we had, buckets of it, it might not be good for us. But like buckets of anything is probably not that great for us, right? So it's always important.
True.
It's always important to remember that we have, really good food safety standards overall. And if there are ingredients that are potentially problematic, it's important to look into like, are they problematic at the dose that's being used in the food? And typically not, because that's what we have food regulatory bodies for. So that's
and I want to say thank you to all of you guys for doing all these peak programs.
Yeah,
without
these are
you,
awesome.
Us athletes, or any athlete out there would not be able to compete without brain food.
Absolutely. So for the nighttime eating piece, are you getting hungry at night? Or is it more of like, I just snack out of habit?
Sometimes, like last night, I was pretty bad because I wanted to have cereal at like 9 o'clock at night.
Right. So the first things I would do is make sure that you're eating lots of protein during the day. So make sure there's
Okay.
a good source of protein with all your meals. And if you're having any snacks, try and get some protein in there. Because that's going to make sure that you actually are getting everything you need, that you're full enough. So that in the evening you don't actually get hungry. And then the other piece is making sure that your meals, feel satisfying enough, so like maybe if you love cereal as a snack, maybe just having it a little bit earlier in the day, and pairing it with a little bit of protein. So kind of working with like moving your snacks just up a little bit and pairing with some protein so that they're more filling as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Erin.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Lori. Preston, you can unmute.
What about that? It's the one protein balls I eat. It's called, I don't know the name of it, called all balls.
Raw
balls. Let me go. I'll show you. Sorry. I don't know how to say it. How to say it? It's all. Are these healthy?
Oh, Lara bars. Yes, I love Lara bars.
Is it because I have it every different day? Like I had it last week, and sometimes once a week. Like today and the next day. Is that okay to have that, or just skip one time?
Lara bars, I think, are a great option because they're made with all whole foods.
If I had it today and I don't have it, and then skip tomorrow, then is that better?
It just depends on how they make you feel. Like, so if you find that if they do have more dates in them, so they are a little bit higher in the carbohydrate. So if you find that you start getting a lot of cravings or something, then you can maybe limit them. But if you find that they just like make you feel full and good and energized, then I would say that they are totally fine.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Preston. Jordan Tyson, you can unmute.
I would have the vegan ingredient with no sugar, with other athlete recipes for that.
Sorry, what's the question?
The question is, why do we eat healthy and be strong? So no sugar. So I would do the vegan ingredient with no sugar. We have to stay strong, stay healthy.
Yes, absolutely. It's important to feel our best.
Thanks, Jordan.
Oh,
thank you. You're welcome.
Laura, you can unmute.
Hello, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Doing good. So I'm on Jenny Craig. So just wondering, because like I have trouble with staying motivated to keep on the food sometimes. Just wondering what else I can do to kind of keep it motivated.
Yeah,
and I do like my candy too. So my sweets, but I don't know about the sugar-free items. Are they okay to have?
So the sugar-free items, it really depends on your preference and how they make you feel. Like I said, some people get bothered by sugar alcohols, which is typically what we find in sugar-free items. Like it'll upset their stomachs. But if it doesn't upset your stomach and they taste good, then they're totally fine to include. It's just a matter of if they satisfy you and if they feel good for your body. Because like I said, sugar alcohols are totally safe. It's just that some people, it gives them digestive problems, depending on your physiology. So that would be the only thing there. And then in terms of the motivation piece, so what I would say is give yourself like a little bit of space to have a favorite treat in a mindful way. So like if there's a candy you love, be like, okay, once a week or twice a week, I'm going to have, a mindful serving of my favorite treat, because sometimes it's important to keep that satisfaction piece in, right? If we're not enjoying anything we're eating, then of course we lose motivation because it's not satisfying. So giving yourself a little bit of wiggle room can actually sometimes make it easier to stick to a plan, because we know that we'll still get those things that we love, right? It might be in smaller amounts, and less often, but knowing that we have space for that can be really helpful. And then the other piece too is get in touch with like why it's important for you, you know, and not so much like around a weight loss goal, because sometimes our motivation with that can ebb and flow, but like, how does it make you feel when you're on a plan? Like, do you feel energized? Do you like feeling more focused? Do you like feeling more organized with things? So that's what I would just kind of tap into, like, why is this important to me beyond just say like a weight loss piece or anything like that?
I feel more energized. And
yeah.
it's just, and especially today with the because the weather was so nice out, I decided to go for a nice long walk just by myself, and it felt really good. And I'm gonna keep that up too, because that'll also help you keep your mind on other things. And also because I'm in school too to be a teacher's aide, so I just trying to keep my mind busy so I'm not thinking about food.
That's awesome. Yeah, like focus on the things that make you feel good about it, because that's a lot more motivating than when we get in our head and we're like, oh, I have to do this. Like, focus on what makes you feel good about it. That's a lot more motivating.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for doing all these night classes. They were so much fun.
Oh, good. I'm so glad you enjoyed them. I love doing them.
Okay, sounds good. Have a good night.
You too.
Thanks, Laura. We will do one final question. So Danielle, you can ask the final question.
Hello, Erin.
Hi.
I am just wondering, like, I go to movies once in a while, and I'm just wondering, what is the best snack you could get at the movies?
It depends on what you are looking for. If you're going just once in a while, then it might make sense for you to just get your favorite treat and enjoy it. But if you obviously are looking for something a bit more health supportive, you can even look at, you know, bringing in something, like if you want to bring in like a little bit of trail mix in like your bag or something like that, you can do that. Or even just getting a smaller size of something. Like if we love movie theater popcorn, we're absolutely allowed to have that be a part of our healthy balance. Maybe we just get a smaller size of it so we can enjoy it more mindfully, things like that. But yeah, making wiggle room for our favorite things is actually a really great way for us to make overall really healthy choices too, because we need that balance.
And I just want to thank you for all these great sessions, and also thank you to the PEAK program for keeping me motivated, because right now, because of health concerns with my family, I can't do a lot of in-person programs. So this is my one way to stay connected with everyone.
That's awesome.
Thanks, Danielle. Well, I just want to say thank you so much, Erin, for joining us again. I know I learned a lot, and I'm sure the athletes learned a lot too. We always value having someone with your experience come and teach us. So thank you very much for joining us. Everyone, I hope you have a fantastic evening, and hopefully I'll see you tomorrow at Social Club. Have a good one, everyone.